Okay, so picture this. You're sitting in a room. It's quiet. There's no TV on, no music, no notification buzzing in your pocket. Nobody is texting you. Nobody is watching. It's just you and the silence and the inside of your own head. And here's the wild part. For most people on this planet, that exact situation is one of the most uncomfortable things they will ever experience. Not pain, not fear, just being alone with themselves. A French guy named Blaise Pascal said something back in the 1600s that basically nobody wanted to hear, and it cuts deeper today than it ever did. He said that nearly all of humanity's problems come from one single thing: our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. That's it. That's the whole diagnosis. And yeah, you're probably thinking that sounds dramatic, but stick with me, because by the end of this, you're gonna see exactly why he was right. And look, if this kind of thing scratches your brain the right way, the weird psychology, the stuff about who you actually are under all the noise, go ahead and hit subscribe. We post this kind of deep dive every single week. Ring the bell if you're feeling spicy. Cool. Now let's get into it, because this rabbit hole goes way deeper than you'd think. Let me explain why Pascal's line still lands so hard. In his time, if you wanted distraction, you actually had to go find it. You had to leave the house, go to a tavern, find a card game, hunt down some other human being. Silence was the default. It was everywhere. You couldn't escape it even if you wanted to. Now flip that around to today. The second, and I mean the literal second, that silence shows up in your life, what do? You grab a screen. You don't even decide to. Your hand just moves. There's a half-second gap of nothing, of quiet, of being alone with your own thoughts, and your body reaches for the phone before your brain has even registered that it's bored. We've built an entire civilization whose main function, basically, is to make sure you never have to be alone with yourself for more than a few seconds at a time. And Pascal is sitting there in the past going, yeah, that's the problem. That right there. That's the thing. So here's the question that opens up everything. Why? Why is being alone with yourself so unbearable that we've spent centuries building escape hatches out of it? What exactly are we running from? Because it's not the quiet itself. Quiet doesn't hurt you. It's what the quiet lets surface. And to understand that, we gotta clear up a confusion that messes almost everybody up. Most people hear the word solitude and they flinch because they think it means loneliness. They hear alone and they think sad, isolated, abandoned, unwanted. But solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. They're not even close. In fact, they're almost opposites. And this distinction is the foundation for literally everything else we're going to talk about. So let's nail it down. Loneliness is connection you wanted and didn't get. That's the whole definition. You reached out and the hand wasn't there. You wanted to be seen. You wanted to belong. You wanted someone to text back, and it didn't happen. Loneliness is a deficit. It's a hunger. It's the gap between the connection you craved and the connection you actually got. It drains you. It hollows you out. You can be lonely in a packed room, surrounded by people, at a party with music blasting, and feel more alone than you've ever felt in your life, because the connection you wanted just isn't landing. Solitude is the complete flip side of that. Solitude is aloneness you chose. You picked it. Nobody forced it on you. You closed the door. You turned off the noise. You stepped away from the crowd on purpose because something in you needed the space. And here's the crazy part. Instead of draining you, it refills you. It puts something back. The exact same number of hours alone, the exact same quiet weekend can either gut you or restore you. And the only difference is whether you chose it or it was inflicted on you. Same room, same silence, same number on the clock. Totally different experience depending on what's happening underneath. Think about it like this. Imagine a quiet Sunday. No plans, nobody around, just you and an empty stretch of hours. For one person, that Sunday is a slow horror. The silence presses in. The thoughts start circling. Every minute feels like proof that nobody wants them around. And by evening, they're scrolling through their phone, desperate for any sign that they exist in someone else's mind. For another person, that exact same Sunday is heaven. They make coffee, they sit by the window, they let their mind wander. They read, they think, they breathe. They come out of it Monday morning feeling like a fully charged battery. Same Sunday, same silence. The difference isn't the situation, it's what surfaces when the noise stops, and whether that person can stand to look at it. And that's where this gets really interesting, because solitude does something specific to your inner world. It acts like a flashlight. Picture walking into a dark room, a room you live in but never really look at. You flick on a flashlight, and suddenly you can see everything that was sitting there in the dark the whole time. That's what solitude does to your inner life. When you strip away the crowd, when you remove all the other people and all the noise and all the things demanding your attention, your real self comes up starkly into view. Your actual values, not the ones you perform, the ones you actually live by. Your real dreams, the ones you secretly want, not the ones you're supposed to want. And your buried fears, all of it. It all rises to the surface the moment there's nothing left to distract you from it. Now here's why that's a problem for so many people. For some folks, when that flashlight comes on, they really like what they see. They look at their inner life and they go, yeah, this is me, I'm okay with this, I can hang out here. But for a whole lot of people, when that light comes on, what gets illuminated is stuff they've spent their entire lives trying not to look at. Regret, fear, a nagging sense that they're living a life that isn't really theirs. Dreams they abandoned, anger they never dealt with. And so the second the flashlight clicks on, they panic and they reach for the off switch, which today is your phone, your TV, a crowd, anything. Literally anything that fills the room back up with noise so they don't have to see what's actually in there. That's the real reason silence is unbearable for so many of us. It's not the silence, it's what the silence reveals. And okay, you might be thinking this is some modern problem, some side effect of phones and social media and our overstimulated little brains. And sure, technology made it worse, but here's the thing. The human relationship with solitude is ancient. This pattern shows up across all of recorded history, in every culture, in every era, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The same move keeps happening over and over again. Somebody steps away from the herd, deliberately, to hear themselves think. Let me walk you through it, because the lineup is genuinely wild. Start with the monks. Way back, early in the history of Christianity, you had men who literally fled into the desert. Not a metaphor, actual deserts. They walked out into the empty wasteland of Egypt and Syria, and they lived alone in caves and huts for years, sometimes decades, because they believed that the only way to find God, and to find themselves, was to remove every single distraction. No society, no comfort, no noise, just sand and sky and silence. These were the Desert Fathers, and they treated solitude as the ultimate spiritual technology. They believed that out there, with nothing left to hide behind, you finally meet the truth of who you are. And a lot of what they wrote about, the temptations, the demons, the wandering thoughts that attacked them in the silence, that's just the flashlight effect we talked about. They went into the quiet, and their whole inner world rose up to meet them, and they decided to face it instead of running. Now fast forward a long way, and you get to a guy named Henry David Thoreau. You might have heard of him. In the 1800s, this American writer got fed up with the noise and the busyness and the pointless rush of society. So he built himself a little cabin out on the edge of a pond called Walden Pond, and he went and lived there alone. For about 2 years, he lived deliberately apart from everyone, growing his own beans, watching the seasons turn, writing, thinking. And the whole point of it, the entire experiment, was to find out what life actually is when you scrape away everything that society piles on top of it. He famously said he went to the woods because he wanted to live deliberately, to confront only the essential facts of life, and to see if he could learn what it had to teach, and not, when he came to die, to discover that he had not lived. That's the flashlight again. That's a man walking away from the crowd to find out who he is when nobody's watching. And then there's Montaigne. This French nobleman in the 1500s did something I genuinely love. He retreated into a tower, a literal tower on his estate, and he filled it with books, and he spent his days up there alone with his own thoughts, writing little essays. And actually, he basically invented the personal essay as a form, just by sitting alone in a room and writing down what was happening inside his own head. He wanted to study one subject more deeply than anything else in the world, and that subject was himself. He wasn't trying to escape life. He was trying to understand his own mind by removing everyone else from the equation so he could finally hear it clearly. Solitude wasn't a punishment for him, it was a laboratory. And here's the one that really cranks it up: Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher. For Nietzsche, solitude wasn't just nice. It wasn't just useful. It was the forge, the fire where you hammer out who you are. He believed that most people just absorb their values from the herd, from the crowd, from everyone around them. You inherit what to want and what to believe, and what's good and what's bad, straight from the mob, without ever questioning a single piece of it. And Nietzsche thought the only way to break out of that, the only way to become a real individual instead of just one more sheep, was to step away, to go alone, to get far enough from the herd that you could finally hear your own voice instead of the echo of everyone else's. He treated solitude as the place where you stop inheriting your values and start inventing your own. That's heavy. That's the difference between living a life that's yours and living a life that was handed to you by a crowd you never even chose. So look at the pattern: monks in the desert, Thoreau at the pond, Montaigne in his tower of books, Nietzsche treating aloneness as the place you build a self from scratch. Different centuries, different countries, different beliefs, but the exact same move. Step away from the herd, get quiet. Hear yourself think. And what that tells you is that this isn't some quirk of the modern overstimulated brain. This is a permanent feature of being human. The crowd pulls you one way, and somewhere deep down, the real you needs to step away from the crowd to even exist. The people we remember, the people who actually became someone, almost all of them figured out how to be alone with themselves. That's not a coincidence. That's the whole game. Now here's where I want to slow down and turn the flashlight on something specific, because we've been talking about what surfaces in solitude, but we haven't really cracked open why it's so threatening. And to do that, we need to bring in a guy named Carl Jung, because Jung basically mapped this entire problem out. And once you understand what he found, you're going to look at yourself and everyone around you completely differently. I'm serious. This part rewires how you see people. So Jung had this concept, and it's one of the most important ideas in all of psychology. He talked about the persona. The word persona originally meant the mask that actors wore on stage in the ancient theater. And Jung used it to describe the mask you wear out in the world. It's the version of you that you show to other people. The face you put on to fit in, to be liked, to win approval, to play your role in society. And here's the thing, having a persona isn't bad. Everybody has one. You need one. You don't act the same way at a job interview as you do with your closest friend. And that's healthy. That's normal. The persona is a tool. It's the interface between you and the social world. The problem starts when the mask stops being a tool and starts being a prison. When you craft this persona so carefully, so obsessively, to win everybody's approval, and you wear it so long and so tightly that you forget there's even a face underneath it. You become the mask. And Jung found something deeply strange about what happens when you do that. Something that sounds almost like a curse, but it's actually just psychology. Here's the trap, and I want you to really sit with this one. The harder you craft a persona to win approval, the more its hidden opposite leaks out. Let me explain, because this is the part that blows people's minds. Jung's whole model of the mind runs on balance. The conscious mind and the unconscious mind are always trying to balance each other out, like a scale. So whatever you push down on one side, the other side pushes back up. Whatever you deny, repress, refuse to be, it doesn't disappear. It goes underground, into what Jung called the shadow, and it builds up pressure, and then it leaks out sideways in ways you can't control and usually can't even see. So picture the man who builds his entire persona around being strong, tough, in control, never weak, never scared, never needs anybody. He performs strength so hard that there's no room for anything else. But all that weakness and fear and vulnerability he's refusing to feel, it doesn't vanish. It goes into the shadow, and it leaks out. It comes out as a desperate need to control everyone around him, because deep down, he's terrified. It comes out as rage the second anyone threatens his image, because the image is all he's got. The man performing strength is the one who reveals, to anyone really paying attention, exactly how weak and scared he actually is. The performance betrays the truth it was built to hide. Or flip it. Take the man who builds his whole persona around being sensitive, gentle, kind, the nicest guy you'll ever meet, never angry, never aggressive, always understanding. He performs sensitivity so completely that there's no room for his own anger, his own assertiveness, his own ability to say no. So where does all that go? Into the shadow. And it leaks out as passive aggression, the little digs, the quiet resentment, the help that comes with strings attached, the favors he holds over your head. The anger he won't express directly comes out crooked and sideways, because the unconscious always balances the equation. You don't get to delete a part of yourself. You only get to choose whether you face it or whether it runs you from the basement. And that's the part people miss. You think you're in control of the mask. You think you're the one wearing it. But the harder you grip it, the more the buried opposite takes the wheel. The persona doesn't free you from your shadow. It feeds it. Now here's where it gets even more brutal, because there's a second trap built right on top of the first one, and this one wrecks people in their actual relationships, in real life, every single day. Jung's insight here connects to something you've probably felt 100 times without ever having a name for it. Think about the person who tries hardest to please everyone, the one who molds themselves into whatever they think you want them to be. They agree with everything you say. They laugh at everything you find funny. They have no rough edges, no strong opinions, no friction. They are, on paper, the most agreeable, pleasant, accommodating person you could ever meet. And here's the double bind. Here's the thing that ruins them. The ones who try hardest to please end up pleasing least. The harder they work to be liked, the less people actually like them. And it feels so unfair because they're doing everything right. They're being so nice. So why does it backfire? Let me explain, because the answer is genuinely fascinating. People can sense the hollowness under a too perfect mask. It's instinctive. You meet someone who has no edges, who agrees with everything, who reflects you back to yourself perfectly, and something in your gut goes, wait, where's the actual person? Who's really in there? Because a real human being has friction. A real person disagrees with you sometimes, has their own opinions, their own moods, their own no. And when all of that is missing, when the mask is too smooth and too perfect, your instincts read it as fake, as empty, as something pretending to be a person. And there's actually a great way to understand why this triggers distrust. You might have heard of something called the uncanny valley. It comes from robotics. The idea is that when a robot or an animation looks kind of human, but not quite, when it's almost right, but something's just slightly off, it doesn't make us feel warm. It makes us feel deeply creeped out. A cartoon robot that's obviously a robot is fine. We like it. But a robot that looks almost exactly human, with skin that's just a little too smooth and eyes that don't quite track right, that thing makes our skin crawl. Because our brains are screaming, that's supposed to be a person, but it's wrong. Something's wrong. Well, Jung's people pleaser triggers the exact same thing, except it's the uncanny valley of the self. A person who is almost a real person, but not quite. A self that's too smooth, too agreeable, too perfectly tailored to whatever you want. And your instincts react to that the same way they react to the creepy robot. Not warmth, not trust. Distrust. A gut-level sense that something is off, that there's no one really home, that you're talking to a performance and not a human. And that's why the people pleaser fails at the one thing they're trying hardest to do. The mask that was supposed to make them lovable is the exact thing that makes them unsettling. The hollowness shows. It always shows. And just sit with how tragic that is for a second. Here's a person pouring their entire life energy into being accepted, contorting themselves into 1,000 shapes to win approval. And the harder they try, the more they push the very thing they want away from themselves. They're starving at a buffet. They're drowning in a foot of water. The solution they've chosen is the exact thing creating the problem. That's the double bind. And almost nobody trapped in it can see it from the inside. Because from the inside, it just feels like, I'm being so good, why doesn't it work? So now you've got two traps stacked on top of each other. Trap 1. The harder you perform a persona, the more its opposite leaks out of your shadow and sabotages you. Trap 2. The harder you mold yourself to please others, the more hollow you seem and the less they trust you. And both of these traps share the same root cause. They both come from living as a performance instead of living as a person. From being the mask instead of being the face. From letting the crowd dictate who you are instead of finding out who you actually are. And how do you find that out? Where do you go to peel off the mask and meet the face? Yeah, back to where we started. Solitude, the quiet room, the flashlight. It all connects. Which brings us to the obvious question. If the mask is the trap, what's the way out? And here's where a lot of people get it completely wrong, so pay attention, because Jung's answer is the opposite of what most people assume. Most people, when they realize their mask is failing them, when they sense that their performance isn't working, what do? They try to build a better mask. They go, okay, this persona isn't winning approval, let me craft a more impressive one, a more charming one. A more successful, more confident, more perfect one. They double down on the performance. They think the problem is that the act wasn't good enough. And that, according to Jung, is exactly the wrong move. That just digs the hole deeper. A better performance is still a performance. A more perfect mask is still a mask. And the better it gets, the deeper into the uncanny valley you fall, and the more your shadow piles up behind it. Jung's way out isn't a better performance. It's killing the performance altogether. He had a word for this, and it's a beautiful one. Individuation. Now break that word down. Individuation. At its root, it means becoming undivided, becoming whole, stopping the war between the mask you show and the self you hide, stopping the split between the person you perform and the person you actually are. Right now, the person trapped in the persona is divided. There's the face they show the world, and there's the buried shadow self full of everything they've refused to be. And those two are at war, and that war is exhausting, and it leaks out and sabotages everything. Individuation is the process of ending that war, of bringing the buried stuff up into the light, looking at it, owning it, and integrating it, making it part of you instead of an enemy in your basement. It means taking the strength and the weakness and saying, both of these are me. Taking the kindness and the anger and saying, both of these are me. stopping the frantic editing of yourself for an audience, and instead becoming one complete, undivided human being, all the parts included, nothing exiled to the shadow. And that, not a shinier mask, but no mask at all, is what Jung said you're actually after. The goal isn't to perform a better self. The goal is to become your whole self. And here's the payoff. Here's what happens to a person who actually does this. And it's genuinely the most powerful idea in this whole thing. The man who fully chooses himself, who does the work, who faces his shadow, who becomes undivided. That man can't be seduced by fantasy, and he can't be reduced to a character in someone else's script. Let me unpack both halves of that, because both are huge. First, he can't be seduced by fantasy. What does that mean? Think about what seduces people. It's the fantasy of who they could be if only they had the right approval, the right image, the right reaction from the crowd. The fantasy of being the impressive guy, the desired one, the admired one. People chase that fantasy their whole lives, contorting themselves to become it, and the chase runs them ragged. But the man who has fully chosen himself, who already knows who he is from the inside, has nothing to chase. The fantasy has no hook in him. You can't bait a man with a better self-image when he's already at peace with the self he's got. He's immune to the con, because the con runs on your dissatisfaction with who you are, and he doesn't have any. And second, he can't be reduced to a character in someone else's script. This one's gorgeous. Think about everyone who tries to use you, to manage you, to fit you into the role they need you to play. The friend who needs you to be the funny sidekick. The partner who needs you to be the one who's always wrong. The boss who needs you to be the one who never says no. The crowd that needs you to be one more sheep. All of them are writing a script and casting you in a part. And the person living as a persona, the person who built their whole self out of other people's approval, that person gets cast easily. They slot right into whatever role anyone hands them because they don't have a self to defend, just a mask that bends whichever way the wind of approval blows. But the man who has done his individuation, who is whole and undivided and rooted in who he actually is, you can't cast him. You hand him a script and it just doesn't take because he already knows what he is and what he isn't. He's not available to be a character in your story because he's too busy being the actual author of his own. And that, right there, that's the whole thing closing the loop. Remember where we started? Pascal saying nearly all our problems come from our inability to sit alone in a quiet room. And now you can see why that's not just a quirky little observation. It's the master key to all of it. Because the quiet room is where you meet your shadow. The quiet room is where the flashlight clicks on and shows you your real values and your real fears and the parts of yourself you've been exiling to win approval. The quiet room is where individuation happens. It's where you stop performing and start being. The monks knew it. Thoreau knew it. Montaigne knew it. Nietzsche knew it. And the reason most people can't sit in that room for 30 seconds without grabbing a screen is that the room is exactly where the work waits for them. And the work is terrifying, because it means facing everything the mask was built to hide. So think about what modern life is actually doing to you when you really frame it this way. It's not just distracting you. It's keeping you from the one place where you'd actually find yourself. Every notification, every endless feed, every bit of noise we pump into the silence, it's an off switch for the flashlight. It's a way of never having to walk into that dark room and see what's there. And the cruel irony is that the thing we're running from, the aloneness, the silence, the confrontation with self, that's not the threat, that's the cure. The threat is staying on the run forever, performing a role for an audience that can sense the hollowness anyway, falling deeper into the uncanny valley of your own life, while your shadow runs the show from the basement, and you never once get to find out who you actually are. Now here's something I want you to really chew on, because it reframes the whole anxiety people feel about being alone. A lot of folks avoid solitude because they're scared of what they'll find. They assume that under the mask, there's something broken, something shameful, something unlovable, and that's why they keep the noise turned up. But that fear is itself part of the trap. Because what's actually under there, for most people, isn't a monster. It's just an unfinished person. Parts that never got looked at, wants that never got admitted, a whole self that got abandoned years ago because the crowd needed a different version of you. The shadow feels scary because it's unfamiliar, not because it's evil. The first time you turn the flashlight on, sure, it's startling. The same way walking into a dark cellar is startling. But the more you go in there, the more you realize it's just the rest of you, waiting to be claimed. The horror people imagine is almost never what's actually down there. And that connects to why solitude refills you instead of draining you, which we touched on at the start, but is worth coming back to now that you understand the shadow. When you choose to be alone, and you let the flashlight come on, and you actually face what surfaces instead of bolting, you're doing integration work. You're taking back the energy that was getting burned, holding the mask in place, and fighting the shadow underground. That war I mentioned, the war between the face you show and the self you hide, that war is expensive. It costs you constantly, every day, in the background, even when you don't notice. And every bit of solitude where you stop running and start facing is a little bit of that war ending. That's why you come out of real solitude feeling restored. It's not magic. You stopped fighting yourself for an hour. You got to be one whole thing instead of two halves at war. Of course that refills you. And compare that to the person who only ever experiences aloneness as loneliness. The unchosen kind, the kind where they're sitting in the silence, desperate for the connection they wanted and didn't get. That person isn't doing integration work. They're just stuck in the deficit, staring at the gap, feeling the absence. And because they never chose the solitude, they never get the gift hidden inside it. They just get the ache. So the same silence is medicine for one person and poison for another. And the difference, again, comes down to choice and to what you do when the flashlight clicks on. Do you run or do you look? Let me put you back inside the scene to really feel this. Picture this. It's a Friday night. You had plans and they fell through. So now you're home alone with a whole empty evening stretching out in front of you. And the apartment is dead quiet. And you feel that pull, that itch, that immediate reach for the phone to fill the space, to find a crowd online, to drown the silence. That's the fork in the road right there. Down one path, you grab the phone and you scroll for 4 hours, and you go to bed feeling somehow emptier than when you started, because all you did was feed the off switch and avoid the room. Down the other path, you put the phone in a drawer and you sit with the quiet. And yeah, it's uncomfortable at first. The thoughts start coming. Some of them are the ones you've been avoiding. But you stay. You let the flashlight come on. And somewhere in that evening, something settles. You hear yourself think for the first time in weeks. You remember a dream you'd buried. You feel a feeling you'd been out running. And you wake up Saturday feeling like a person again instead of a performance. Same Friday night. Same silence. Two completely different lives, branching off from one tiny choice about whether you can stand to be alone with yourself. And that choice, multiplied across 1,000 nights, across years, is basically the difference between the people who become someone and the people who stay trapped playing a role. It's not dramatic. It's not one big heroic moment. It's the quiet, repeated willingness to sit in the room, to turn the flashlight on and not flinch, to meet your shadow and shake its hand instead of slamming the cellar door. The monks did it in the desert for decades. You can do it on a random Tuesday night for 20 minutes. The scale is different, but the move is identical. Step away from the herd. Get quiet. Hear yourself think. Become undivided. Here's another angle on why this matters so much, and it's about other people, not just you. Remember the people pleaser, the one stuck in the uncanny valley of the self, the one nobody quite trusts because the mask is too smooth. Here's the thing, you can't fake your way out of that with technique. You can read every book on charisma and how to be likable and how to win friends. And if you're still performing, people will still feel the hollowness. The only thing that actually fixes it is becoming real, becoming whole. Because the warmth and the trust that the people pleaser is starving for, that only flows toward a person who's actually there, who has edges, who has a real no inside them and a real yes, who isn't just reflecting you back at yourself. The paradox is that the moment you stop trying so hard to be liked, the moment you let your real self show up with all its rough edges, that's the moment people actually start to trust you. Because now there's someone home. Now you've climbed out of the uncanny valley and onto the other side, where a real, slightly imperfect, fully present human being is way more lovable than any flawless mask could ever be. So the work you do alone in the quiet room, facing your shadow, becoming undivided, killing the performance, that's not selfish, that's not navel-gazing. It's actually the thing that lets you connect with other people for real. The person who has met themselves is the only person who can truly meet you. Everybody else is just two masks talking to each other, two performances bouncing off each other, while the real people stay hidden behind them, lonely even when they're together. And that's loneliness in the truest sense. Connection you wanted and couldn't get, because nobody in the room was actually present enough to give it. Two performances can't connect, only two people can. And you only get to be a person by doing the work that scares everybody, the work that waits in the quiet room. Let me bring Nietzsche back for a second, because his angle on this is the sharpest of all, and it ties everything together. Remember, he said most people just inherit their values from the herd. They never choose anything. What's good, what's bad, what's worth wanting, what's shameful. All of it gets downloaded straight from the crowd, no questions asked. And the persona, the mask, the people-pleasing, that's the herd's values running your life. You perform strength because the herd values strength. You please because the herd punishes those who don't. Every single thread of the mask is woven from somebody else's expectations. So when Nietzsche says solitude is the forge where you invent your own values, what he's really describing is the same individuation Jung talked about, just from a different direction. It's the place where you stop being a node in the crowd's nervous system and start being your own center of gravity. Where you ask, for maybe the first time in your life, not what does the herd want me to want, but what do I actually want? What do I actually value? Who am I when nobody's grading me? And you cannot ask that question in a crowd. It's impossible. The crowd is the noise. The crowd is the thing drowning out the answer. You can only ask it in the quiet room, alone, with the flashlight on. That's why every single one of these figures across all of history made the same move. The desert, the pond, the tower, the mountain solitude, they're all the same room. The room Pascal said we can't sit in. The room where you finally get to find out if the life you're living is actually yours, or just a script the herd handed you that you've been performing so long you forgot it wasn't your own. So here's the thing I want to leave hanging as we move deeper into all this, because there's so much more underneath it. We've established the diagnosis, Pascal's room, the thing we can't bear to sit in. We've separated solitude from loneliness, chosen aloneness that refills you versus unwanted disconnection that drains you. We've seen the flashlight effect, how silence reveals your real self. We've traced the pattern across all of history, monks and Thoreau and Montaigne and Nietzsche, all making the same escape from the herd. And we've gone deep into Jung, the persona that becomes a prison, the shadow that leaks out the opposite of whatever you perform, the double bind, where the hardest pleasers please the least, the uncanny valley of the self, and the way out through individuation, becoming whole and undivided, until you're a person who can't be seduced by fantasy or cast in somebody else's script. But here's what we haven't cracked open yet, and it's where this gets even more uncomfortable. What does the shadow actually contain specifically? What are the things people most commonly exile down there, and why those things in particular? And what happens, exactly, in the moment you turn that flashlight on for the very first time? What does the confrontation actually look like? And why do so many people fail at it right at the threshold? Because knowing that the work exists is one thing. Actually walking into that dark room and doing it is another thing entirely. And there are specific reasons it goes wrong. Specific traps right at the doorway that catch almost everyone. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Okay, so let's walk right up to that dark room and actually open the door. Because this is where the real work hides, and this is where almost everybody slips. We left off asking two questions. What does the shadow actually contain, specifically? And what happens in the exact moment you turn the flashlight on for the first time? Because here's the thing. There's a doorway, a threshold, and the threshold is where people fail. Not in the middle of the work, not at the end, right at the start, right at the moment they're about to see what's really in there. And there are specific reasons for that, specific traps sitting right at the doorway, and once you can name them, you stop being ambushed by them. So let me explain. First, what's actually in the shadow? Jung was very clear that the shadow isn't just a junk drawer of evil. That's the cartoon version, and it's wrong. And getting it wrong is one of the first traps right there at the threshold. People hear the word shadow and they picture some dark monster, some secret cruelty, some horrible thing they're hiding. And sure, some of that can be in there. But here's the part that surprises everybody. The shadow is made of whatever you rejected, full stop. And a huge amount of what people reject isn't bad at all. It's good, it's gold. Let me explain that, because it's genuinely one of the most freeing ideas in all of this. Picture a kid growing up in a family where ambition is treated as dangerous. Maybe wanting too much got you slapped down, got you laughed at, got you labeled greedy or full of yourself. So that kid learns real early that ambition is unsafe. And so they exile it. They push their own drive, their own hunger, their own desire to be big, straight down into the shadow because the herd around them, the family in this case, punished it. Now that kid grows up into an adult who feels strangely flat, strangely small, who watches other people chase big things and feels a confusing mix of contempt and envy, and who has no idea why they feel stuck. The ambition didn't die. It went into the shadow, and it's sitting down there, this powerful, valuable, totally healthy part of them, exiled and rotting, because once upon a time, the crowd said no. Jung had a phrase for this. He said the shadow is 90% pure gold. Most of what we bury isn't our cruelty, it's our power, our anger that could have been healthy boundaries, our desire that could have been a real life, our wildness, our creativity, our capacity to say no, our ambition, our sexuality, our strangeness, all the parts that some crowd, at some point, told us were unacceptable. And so we packed them away to win approval, and now they sit in the dark. And the tragedy is that they're exactly the parts we'd need to become whole. The gold is in the shadow. That's why facing it isn't just about confronting your darkness. It's about reclaiming everything you abandoned to be liked. And here's the crazy part. The thing you most despise in other people, the trait that makes your skin crawl when you see it in someone else, that disproportionate, irrational, almost allergic reaction you have, that's very often a signpost pointing straight at your own shadow. Jung talked about this through the idea of projection. When you've exiled a part of yourself, you don't stop seeing it. You just stop seeing it in yourself, and you start seeing it everywhere out there, in other people, magnified, exaggerated, infuriating. The person who buried their own ambition gets weirdly, intensely angry at ambitious people, calls them shallow, calls them sellouts, feels a heat about it that's way out of proportion to anything those people actually did. Why the heat? Because they're not really mad at those people. They're mad at the exiled part of themselves, the part those people are freely living that they never let themselves touch. So here's a tool that falls right out of this, and it's almost unfair how useful it is. The next time you have a wildly strong negative reaction to someone, not a normal dislike, but that disproportionate, can't let it go, why does this bother me so much reaction? Pause and ask yourself, what is this person doing that I won't let myself do? What are they being that I've forbidden myself from being? Because a lot of the time, the answer is sitting right there, and it's a piece of your own gold that you exiled, now walking around in someone else's body, making you furious because they get to have it and you don't. Your strongest judgments of others are often a map of your own shadow. That's a brutal mirror, but it's an incredibly accurate one. Okay, so now you know what's in the room. Gold, mostly. Exiled power, exiled desire, exiled parts of you, plus, yeah, some genuinely difficult stuff, some shame and fear and ugliness too. Now let's talk about the moment you actually walk in, the threshold. Because this is where it gets real, and this is where most people turn around and run. Picture this. You finally decided to do it. You're alone, the noise is off, you're sitting in the quiet, and you've made the choice to actually look instead of grabbing the off switch. And the flashlight comes on, and the very first thing that happens is, it's awful. It feels bad. And here's the first trap, the one that catches almost everyone right at the doorway. People assume that if it feels bad, they're doing it wrong. They assume the discomfort means something has gone wrong, that they should stop, that this isn't for them, that they're just not the kind of person who can do this. So they bolt. They grab the phone, they turn the noise back on, and they tell themselves, see, I tried, it doesn't work for me. But here's the truth. The discomfort isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. The discomfort is the work. It's the exact thing you came to do. Think about it physically for a second. If you've been holding a heavy weight in one position for years, and you finally set it down, the first thing you feel isn't relief, it's pain. The blood rushing back in, the cramped muscles screaming as they unclench. That pain isn't injury, it's recovery. It's the cost of unclenching something that's been locked up way too long. The shadow work is the same. The stuff coming up feels bad, precisely because it's stuff you've been straining to hold down for years. And the strain reverses when you let go, and that hurts. The discomfort is the unclenching. If it felt great immediately, you wouldn't be touching anything real. The fact that it's hard is the proof you've found the actual material. That reframe alone gets people past the first threshold. But there's a second trap right behind it, and this one's sneakier. Once people accept that the discomfort is okay, a lot of them swing too hard the other way, and they start wallowing. They go into the room and they marinate in every bad feeling. They rake through every regret. They spiral down into self-criticism and shame and call it shadow work. And that's not it either. That's just rumination. That's just suffering with extra steps. The difference between facing your shadow and wallowing in it is the difference between looking at something and drowning in it. Let me explain the distinction because it matters enormously. Facing the shadow means you observe it. You see the buried anger, the exiled ambition, the old fear, the shame, and you look at it the way you'd look at an object in your hands. You turn it over. You go, oh, there you are. That's interesting. That's been driving me this whole time. You acknowledge it, you feel it, but you stay the one doing the looking. You don't become the thing. Wallowing is the opposite. Wallowing is when you stop being the observer and you get swallowed. You don't look at the shame, you become the shame. You collapse into it. You let it tell you the story of who you are. And that doesn't integrate anything. It just deepens the rut. The whole skill of this work is staying in the observer's chair while letting the buried stuff come up into view. Witnessing, not drowning. That's the razor's edge. And learning to walk it is most of the game. And there's a beautiful, almost paradoxical reason why witnessing works and wallowing doesn't. The moment you can observe something, you're already bigger than it. You're already not fully identified with it. The part of you that watches the anger is, by definition, more than the anger. The part of you that notices the fear is not itself afraid in that moment. It's just noticing. So every time you witness a piece of your shadow, instead of collapsing into it, you're proving to yourself that you are the larger thing, the container, the awareness, and not just the contents. And that's how integration actually happens. Not by fighting the shadow, not by drowning in it, but by holding it in awareness long enough that it stops being a stranger in the basement and becomes a known, owned, integrated part of the whole you. You make friends with it by looking at it steadily, without flinching and without dissolving. Now here's a third trap at the threshold, and this one is maybe the most common of all. And it's so quiet that most people never even notice it's happening. It's the trap of staying busy. Not busy with the phone, not the obvious distraction, but busy with self-improvement, with productivity, with goals, with what looks like a meaningful, full, admirable life. See, a lot of people figured out long ago that they couldn't sit in the quiet room. So instead of grabbing junk food distractions, they grab respectable ones. They fill every hour with work, with projects, with optimizing and achieving and crossing things off lists. And from the outside, it looks great. It looks like a person who has their life together. But underneath, it's the same flight from the room. It's just dressed up nicer. Let me explain why this one's so dangerous. The junk distraction, the scrolling, the binge watching. At least most people know, somewhere deep down, that it's avoidance. There's a little voice that goes, "This isn't good for me." But the respectable distraction comes with applause. The crowd cheers for the busy, productive, always achieving person. So that little warning voice never fires, because everyone around you is telling you you're doing great. You can spend an entire life this way, a productive, accomplished, admired life. That is, underneath, one long, unbroken sprint away from ever having to sit alone in the quiet room and meet yourself. And the cruel thing is, you might never even find out, because the applause never stops long enough for the silence to ask its question. Pascal actually nailed this one too, and it's worth bringing him back for it. He had this idea of what he called diversion, this French word, divertissement, which basically means all the activity we throw ourselves into to avoid thinking about the hard truths of our existence. And his point was razor sharp. He said a man would rather chase a hare across a field all day, exhausting himself, than sit at home and think, even though if you offered him the hare for free, just handed it to him, he wouldn't want it. It's not the hare he wants, it's the chase. The chase is the distraction. The chase keeps him from being alone with himself. And Pascal saw that almost all of human activity, even the ambitious, impressive, world-building kind, is at some level a chase whose secret purpose is to keep us from the quiet room. We are, basically, terrified animals running from a silence that would show us ourselves. And we'll dress the running up as anything: work, war, romance, ambition, hobbies, scrolling, as long as it keeps us moving and keeps the room at our backs. So now you've got 3 traps at the threshold. 1, thinking the discomfort means you're doing it wrong, when actually the discomfort is the work. 2, swinging into wallowing instead of witnessing, drowning in the shadow instead of observing it. 3, escaping the room through respectable busyness that the crowd applauds, so you never even notice you're running. And the reason I'm laying these out so carefully is that knowing they're there changes everything. When you walk into the room and it feels bad, instead of bolting, you go, "Ah, trap 1, this is supposed to feel bad, I keep going." When you feel yourself starting to spiral, you go, "Trap 2, witness it, don't drown, back to the observer's chair." When you notice you've filled every hour with productive noise, you go, "Trap 3, that's the respectable diversion, I'm still running, time to actually stop." The map doesn't make the territory easy, but it stops you from getting ambushed. Now I want to go back to Jung and push into something even deeper, because we've been talking about the shadow as the buried stuff, but Jung had this whole vision of what the integrated, whole self actually looks like, and it connects to something we touched on at the very start, this idea of the self that can't be reduced to a character in someone else's script. There's a name for the deepest version of this work, and Jung used the word self with a capital S, which is confusing, so let me unpack it. For Jung, there's the little self, the ego, the everyday I, the part of you that thinks of itself as you, the part wearing the persona and managing the day. And then there's the big self, the whole psyche, the entire system, conscious and unconscious together, the totality of who you are, including everything in the shadow, everything you've never met, the whole deep ocean, and not just the wave on top. And individuation, the real goal, is the long process of the little ego self gradually coming into right relationship with that big self. Not the ego conquering everything, not the unconscious taking over, but the two of them coming into a kind of balance, a wholeness, where the person is no longer at war with themselves and is instead operating from the full depth of who they actually are. And here's why that matters for everything we've talked about. The person operating from the whole self has access to all of themselves, the strength and the weakness, the kindness and the anger, the ambition and the rest, all of it integrated and available. They don't have to perform strength while hiding weakness, because they own both. And a person who owns their weakness is actually genuinely strong in a way the performer never can be. They don't have to perform kindness while leaking passive aggression. Because they own their anger, they can say a clean no, and so their kindness becomes real instead of a mask. Wholeness makes the performance unnecessary because there's nothing left to hide. The whole person isn't trying to look any particular way. They just are, and the are includes everything. And that's the deepest reason they can't be cast in someone else's script. There's no gap in them for the hook to catch. No exiled part desperate for approval that someone can exploit. No hollow spot that needs the crowd's validation to feel real. They're full, and you can't manipulate a full person the way you can manipulate a hungry one. Let me put that idea into a scene because it's easy to talk about in the abstract and harder to feel. Picture two men in the exact same situation. They're both at a party, both in a conversation with someone important, someone whose approval could really help them. Man number one is operating from the persona. Underneath his smooth surface, his shadow is screaming with the need to impress, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the hunger for this important person to like him. And that need leaks out. It shows in the slightly too eager laugh, the agreeing with everything, the way he molds himself in real time to whatever he thinks this person wants. And the important person feels it. They feel the hollowness, the uncanny valley, the absence of an actual self underneath. And they instinctively trust him less, even if they can't say why. The harder he reaches, the more he repels. Man number two is operating from the whole self. He'd like this person's approval too. He's not a robot, he's human. The want is there. But the want isn't desperate because his sense of who he is doesn't depend on it. He's already whole with or without this person's good opinion. So he shows up as himself. He disagrees when he disagrees. He has actual edges, actual opinions, and actual no. He's present. And the important person feels that too. They feel that there's a real human being in front of them, someone with a center, someone who isn't going to bend whichever way the wind blows. And they trust him more. They're drawn to him, not because he performed better, but because he didn't perform at all. Same party, same conversation, same stakes. And the man who needed it less is the one who gets it, because the neediness itself was the poison. That's the whole double bind playing out live. And the only cure is wholeness. And wholeness only comes from the work in the quiet room. And here's a thought that I think is genuinely worth sitting with for a long time. We tend to think of confidence as a thing you build by accumulating achievements. Like, if I just succeed enough, accomplish enough, get enough approval banked up, then I'll finally feel solid, finally feel like enough. But notice what that actually is. That's trying to fill the hollow spot from the outside, pouring external validation into an internal hole. And it never works, because the hole has no bottom. There's never enough approval, never enough success, to fill a self that's empty in the center. The man chasing it stays hungry forever, and the hunger keeps leaking out and keeps sabotaging him, and so he chases harder, and the hole stays empty. Real solidity, the kind that doesn't depend on the next win, doesn't come from the outside at all. It comes from wholeness on the inside. From having met yourself, reclaimed your exiled parts, ended the Civil War, and become one undivided thing. That's a self that doesn't need the next achievement to feel real, because it's already real, all the way down. And that, ironically, is usually the person who goes on to achieve the most, not because they need it, but because they're free to actually pursue things, instead of frantically using things to plug a hole. Let me bring in another historical figure here, because this lineage we started building in the first part keeps going, and it keeps proving the point. Think about the Stoics, the ancient Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, who happened to be the emperor of Rome, the single most powerful man in the entire known world at the time. And what did he do? He wrote a private journal to himself, just for himself. Nobody was ever supposed to read it. We call it the Meditations now, but he never titled it that, never meant it for an audience. It was the most powerful man alive, sitting alone, in the quiet, writing to himself, reminding himself who he wanted to be, wrestling with his own fears and angers and temptations on the page. Think about that. He could have had anything: endless distraction, endless flattery, endless diversion. The entire empire was his hare to chase. And instead, again and again, he chose the quiet room. He chose to sit with himself and do the work. And the reason his private notes survived for nearly 2,000 years and still hit people in the chest today is precisely that they're real. They're a man being undivided on the page, not performing for anyone, just meeting himself honestly. The most powerful man in the world found his actual strength in solitude, not on the throne. And the Stoics had this whole practice that connects beautifully to everything we've said. They practiced what they sometimes called the view from above, deliberately stepping back in their own minds from all the noise and the drama and the crowd, and looking at their own life from a great height, the way you'd look down at a city from a mountain. And the point of it was to get distance from the herd's values, from the petty status games, from the endless chase, and to see what actually matters when you strip all that away. It's the flashlight again. It's solitude as a tool for seeing clearly. They understood, just like the monks and Thoreau and Montaigne and Nietzsche, that you cannot see your own life clearly while you're drowning in the crowd's noise. You have to step back. You have to get quiet. You have to be alone with it. The same move, over and over, across 2,000 years and every culture that ever produced a wise person. Step away from the herd, get quiet, hear yourself think. Now I want to flip to the dark side of the crowd for a minute, because we keep saying step away from the herd like it's obvious why, and I want to make it visceral. What actually happens to a person who never steps away? Who lives their entire life fully inside the crowd, fully plugged into the herd, never once alone in the quiet room. Jung thought about this a lot, and he had some genuinely chilling things to say about it, especially having lived through some of the darkest crowd behavior in all of human history. Here's the thing Jung saw. When a person has no inner center, when they've never done the work, never met themselves, never become an individual, they don't actually become nothing. Nature abhors a vacuum. Instead, they get filled up by the crowd. The herd pours into the empty center and takes the wheel. And a person like that is incredibly dangerous, not because they're evil, but because they have no self to put the brakes on. They'll go along with whatever the crowd is doing, feel whatever the crowd is feeling, do whatever the crowd demands, because there's no individual in there to say, wait, no, this isn't right, this isn't me. Jung looked at the mass movements of his own century, the way ordinary people got swept up into doing monstrous things, and he understood it through exactly this lens. The people who got swept up weren't all monsters. Most of them were just empty. They'd never developed an inner self, so when the crowd surged, there was nothing inside them to resist it. They were hollow, and the hollow gets filled by whatever's loudest. And that's the deepest, most serious reason individuation matters, and why the quiet room isn't some self-help luxury. The person who has done the work, who has a real inner center, who has met their own shadow and become whole, that person is, in a sense, inoculated against the worst of the crowd. Not perfectly, nobody's perfect, but they have something the empty person doesn't. They have a self that can say no. A center of gravity the herd can't override. When the crowd surges towards something ugly, the whole person has an inner voice that goes, "That's not me, I won't." And that voice is loud enough to stand against the mob. The empty person has no such voice, because they never built one, because they never sat in the quiet room long enough for it to form. So the stakes of all this aren't just personal happiness or better relationships, although it's those too. The stakes are whether you're a person who can stand on their own when it counts, or whether you're just one more node in whatever the crowd decides to become. That's not a small thing. That might be the whole thing. Let me put you back inside a scene to feel the weight of it. Imagine you're in a crowd, any crowd, a mob worked up about something, everyone shouting the same thing, everyone feeling the same heat, and you can feel it pulling at you, that delicious, terrifying tug of just dissolving into the mass, of stopping being a separate person and becoming part of the one big roaring thing. It feels good. That's the dirty secret. Losing yourself in the crowd feels good. It feels like relief, like you can finally stop carrying the weight of being a separate self. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous, and that's exactly why so many people never want to do the work, because being a separate, whole individual is heavier than dissolving into the herd. The crowd offers you an escape from the burden of being yourself. And the only thing that lets you keep your feet when that tug comes, the only thing that lets you stay a person instead of melting into the mob, is having actually built a self in the first place. In the quiet room, alone, where nobody was cheering and nobody was watching, and you had to find out who you were with no crowd to tell you. So you see how it all keeps circling back to the same place. Pascal's room, the quiet, the aloneness we can't bear. Everything, the shadow and its gold, the persona and its prison, the double bind of the pleaser, the uncanny valley of the false self, individuation and wholeness, the strength of Marcus Aurelius alone with his journal, the danger of the empty person swept up by the mob. Every single thread leads back to the same room and the same choice. Can you sit in it? Can you turn the flashlight on? Can you stay when it gets uncomfortable, witness without wallowing, resist the respectable diversion, and actually meet what's there? Now here's something I haven't said yet that I think reframes the whole thing in a kinder light, because so far this might sound like grim, heavy, scary work, and I don't want to leave you with just that. Here's the kinder truth. The self you'd meet in that room is not your enemy. It never was. All this time, the parts you exiled into the shadow have been waiting for you, not to attack you, to be welcomed home. Your buried ambition isn't down there plotting against you. It's down there starving, hoping you'll finally let it live. Your exiled anger isn't a demon. It's a guard dog you locked in the basement, and it's been barking all these years not to hurt you, but because it had a job to do and you wouldn't let it do it. Your fear isn't trying to ruin you. It's trying to protect you, badly, from things that maybe aren't even threats anymore. Every exiled part has a reason, an origin, usually a moment where some crowd said this part of you is unacceptable, and you believed them, and you locked it away. And the work of facing the shadow is, at its heart, an act of homecoming. It's going down into the basement, opening all the locked doors, and saying to each exiled part, okay, I'm sorry I locked you up. Come back. You're allowed now. You're me. That's a much warmer picture than fighting demons, and it's actually the more accurate one. Jung didn't think of integration as a battle you win. He thought of it as a kind of reconciliation, a coming together. The whole self isn't a self that conquered its shadow. It's a self that made peace with it, that took back everything it had thrown away, that stopped being at war and became whole. And wholeness feels like relief. After the initial discomfort, after the unclenching pain, what comes is a kind of settling, a kind of coming home to yourself that people who've done it describe as the first time they ever felt fully real. Not happy necessarily, not fixed, not perfect, but real, present, all there. One undivided person instead of a managed surface over a buried mess. And here's a subtle thing about that homecoming that I think is really important. It's not a one-time event. This is another trap people fall into. They think individuation is a destination, a finish line, a thing you complete and then you're done, enlightened, sorted, integrated forever. It's not. It's a relationship. It's an ongoing practice. The shadow isn't a box you empty once and seal up. It's a living part of you that keeps generating new material as you keep living and keep encountering new situations that ask new things of you. There's always more in the dark. There's always another exiled part, another projection, another place where you're still performing instead of being. And the whole person isn't the person who finished the work. It's the person who keeps doing it, who keeps going back into the room, who keeps the relationship with their own depth alive instead of slamming the door and declaring victory. Wholeness isn't a state you achieve. It's a way of living, a willingness to keep meeting yourself over and over for the rest of your life. Which means, and this is kind of beautiful, the quiet room isn't a thing you visit once to fix yourself and then leave forever. It's a place you keep coming back to, a practice, maybe 20 minutes some evenings, maybe a long quiet weekend now and then, maybe a daily habit of sitting with yourself before the noise of the day floods in. The monks didn't go to the desert once, they lived there. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to himself one time. He kept a journal for years. Montaigne didn't visit his tower for an afternoon. He returned to it again and again across his whole life. The relationship with solitude isn't a single heroic confrontation. It's a lifelong practice of keeping the door to yourself open, of refusing to let the noise win permanently, of coming back to the quiet again and again to hear yourself think and to meet whatever new thing has surfaced since last time. Now I want to address something practical that's probably nagging at you, because it's nagging at a lot of people who hear all this. You might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but I genuinely cannot sit in a quiet room. I've tried. My mind races. I get anxious. I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. I last about 90 seconds before I'm desperate for the phone. Is something wrong with me? And the answer is no, absolutely not. And understanding why is the next piece of this. Here's the thing. If you've spent your entire life filling every silence with noise, then the ability to sit with yourself is a muscle that has completely atrophied. It's not that you're broken. It's that you've never trained it, or you trained it once as a kid and then let it waste away under a decade of constant stimulation. And a wasted muscle, the first time you try to use it, screams. It shakes. It gives out almost immediately. That's not a sign you can't do it. That's a sign you haven't done it in a long time. You wouldn't walk into a gym after 10 years on the couch, fail to lift a heavy weight on your first try, and conclude that you're physically incapable of strength. You'd understand that strength is built gradually, that the first attempts are supposed to be weak, that the weakness is the starting line, not a verdict. The capacity for solitude is exactly the same. The racing mind, the crawling skin, the desperation for the phone after 90 seconds. That's just an out-of-shape muscle on its first day back. And like any muscle, it rebuilds with practice, gradually, a little stronger each time, until one day you can sit in the quiet for an hour and it feels like the most natural thing in the world. And that reframe takes so much pressure off, because it means you don't have to be good at this. You're not supposed to be good at it yet. You're supposed to be bad at it and do it anyway, a little bit, regularly, and let the capacity rebuild on its own schedule. 90 seconds is fine. 90 seconds is a rep. Do it again tomorrow. The monks spent decades building this. You can start with 2 minutes of not reaching for your phone, and that's not nothing. That's the first rep of a muscle that's going to carry you, eventually, all the way into the room where you actually meet yourself. So let me gather up where we are, because we've gone deep and there's still a lot of road ahead. We cracked open the shadow and found that it's mostly gold, exiled power and desire and ambition, and the parts of you the crowd told you were unacceptable, not just darkness. We found the projection trick, how your strongest judgments of others map your own buried self. We walked up to the threshold and named the 3 traps that catch people right at the door, mistaking the discomfort for failure, swinging into wallowing instead of witnessing, and escaping through respectable busyness the crowd applauds. We brought in Pascal's diversion, the chase whose secret job is to keep us from the room. We went deeper into Jung's whole self and saw why wholeness makes the performance unnecessary and makes you unmanipulable. We watched the double bind play out live at a party. We saw Marcus Aurelius find his real strength alone with his journal, and the Stoics practicing the view from above. We faced the dark stakes, the empty person with no center who gets filled by the mob and can't say no. And we softened it with the truth that the shadow isn't your enemy, that the work is a homecoming, that it's a lifelong practice and not a finish line, and that the inability to sit in the quiet is just an atrophied muscle that rebuilds with reps. But here's what's still waiting in the dark, and it's where we're headed next. We've talked a lot about the individual, you alone in the room, meeting yourself. But what happens when two people who've done this work come together? What does connection actually look like between two whole selves instead of two masks? And on the flip side, what happens in relationships when one person is whole and the other is still all persona, still all performance? Because that collision creates some very specific, very recognizable patterns, the kind you've almost certainly lived through without having a name for them. And there's a deeper question underneath all of it. If solitude is so essential, if being alone with yourself is the whole game, then what is love? What is real connection? And how do you square the need to be fully yourself, alone, with the equally real need to be truly close to another person? That tension is one of the most important things in all of human life, and it's exactly where we're going next. Okay, so here's the question we left hanging, and it's a big one. If solitude is the whole game, if being alone with yourself is where you actually become a person, then what the heck is love? What is real connection? Because on the surface, those two things sound like they're at war. You've got to be fully yourself, alone, in the quiet room, with no one watching. And you've also got to be truly close to another human being, fully seen, fully known. How do you do both? How do you be undivided and alone, and also deeply joined to someone else? And here's the thing, this isn't a contradiction at all. In fact, the people who figured out solitude are the only people who can actually do love right. Let me explain, because this flips everything you think you know about closeness. There's this line that gets thrown around, this idea that you can't love someone else until you love yourself. And honestly, it's been said so many times, it's become mush. It's a fridge magnet. It means nothing anymore. But underneath the mush, there's a real and brutal mechanism, and Jung's work cuts right to it. So let me sharpen it back into something true. The reason a person who hasn't done the inner work can't really love is not because of some vague self-esteem thing. It's because they don't have a self to love with. They're a mask. And a mask can't love. A mask can only seek approval. So what looks like love from a person who's all persona is actually something much more desperate and much more hollow. It's a transaction. It's, I will be whatever you need me to be, and in exchange, you will fill the hole in the center of me. And that's not love. That's two starving people trying to eat each other. Picture this. You've got two people, and neither one has done the work. Neither one has met themselves. Both of them are empty in the center. Both of them are running from the quiet room. Both of them are wearing carefully built masks. And they meet, and they fall in what they call love. And here's what's actually happening underneath. Person A looks at person B and thinks, finally, here's someone who will fill my hole. Here's someone whose approval will make me feel real. And person B is thinking the exact same thing about person A. So you've got two empty vessels, each one trying to get filled by the other, each one demanding that the other person be the source of their wholeness. And that can feel amazing at first. That rush, that intensity, that can't live without you feeling. A lot of that is just two holes recognizing each other and going, oh thank God, rescue. But it's not built on anything, because neither of them has anything to give. They're both empty. They're both there to take. And two people who are both there to take eventually run dry, and then it curdles, and then it gets ugly, because now each one feels betrayed. You were supposed to fill me. Why aren't you filling me? This is your fault. And here's the crazy part. That dynamic, that two empty vessels thing, is what an enormous number of people think love actually is. They think love is finding the person who completes you. They literally use that word, completes, like you're a half waiting for your other half. But notice what that idea assumes. It assumes you show up incomplete. It assumes there's a hole in you, and the job of the other person is to fill it. And Jung would look at that and go, no, that's not love, that's projection. That's you taking your own unmet, unintegrated, exiled self and demanding that another human being carry it for you. And no human being can carry that. It's not their job, and they can't do it, and the demand will crush them and crush the relationship. Because what you actually need isn't another person. It's to go into your own quiet room and reclaim the parts of yourself you exiled. The hole was never their job to fill, it was always yours. Let me get really specific about the projection thing, because this is where it gets wild and where you'll start recognizing your own life. Remember, in the earlier part, we talked about how you project your shadow onto people you irrationally hate. The trait you despise in others is often your own exiled trait. Well, here's the romantic version, and Jung wrote about this extensively. You don't just project your shadow onto people you hate. You also project your idealized, missing, exiled good parts onto people you fall for. So the person who buried their own creativity falls desperately for an artist and feels like that artist is the most magical, alive, vital person in the world, because they're seeing their own exiled creativity walking around in someone else's body, and they're falling in love with a piece of themselves they abandoned. The person who exiled their own strength falls for someone strong and feels weak and small and worshipful next to them because they handed their own strength to that other person to carry. We fall in love, so often, not with a real human being, but with the parts of ourselves we threw away, now wearing someone else's face. And here's why that's a trap and not a triumph. When you fall for your own projection, you're not actually seeing the other person at all. You're seeing a screen onto which you've projected your missing pieces. And that feels incredibly intense. It feels like destiny, like soulmates, like this person is everything, precisely because they're carrying your own lost gold and you're desperate to get near it. But it can't last because they're a real human being, not a screen. And eventually, the real person underneath the projection starts to show through. They have a bad day, they're petty about something, they're tired and boring and human, and the projection cracks. And the person who fell in love with the projection feels betrayed, feels like the magic died, feels like this person changed, but the person didn't change. The projection just wore off, and now, for the first time, you're seeing the actual human being, and you don't know what to do with them, because you were never in love with them. You were in love with your own exiled self that you'd hung on them like a coat on a hook. This is why so many relationships have that exact arc. The dizzying high at the start, the certainty that this is the one, followed months or years later by disillusionment, by who are you, by you're not who I thought you were. That whole arc is the life cycle of a projection. Falling for the screen, then slowly seeing the real person behind it, then grieving the screen as if a real thing died. And the people stuck in this cycle just go from person to person, chasing that initial high again and again, never understanding that the high was never about the other person. It was about getting close to their own buried self. And that the way to actually keep their own gold is not to find someone to project it onto, but to go into the quiet room and reclaim it. To stop hanging their lost creativity on artists and reclaim their own creativity. To stop hanging their lost strength on strong people and reclaim their own strength. Every projection you withdraw is a piece of yourself you take back. And the wild result is that when you've withdrawn your projections, you can finally see the other person as they actually are. And that right there, is the beginning of real love. Not love of a screen, love of an actual, real, whole, separate human being. So now flip it all around and look at what love looks like between two people who have done the work. Two whole selves. Two people who went into their own quiet rooms, met their shadows, reclaimed their exiled parts, and showed up complete. What happens when those two come together? Here's the beautiful part. They don't need each other to fill a hole, because there is no hole. They're already whole. So the connection isn't built on need, it's built on choice. They're not together because they're desperate, because they're empty, because they're trying to extract wholeness from each other. They're together because they genuinely want to be, because they choose each other freely, every day, out of fullness instead of out of lack. And that, a relationship built on two full people choosing each other, rather than two empty people clinging to each other. That's about as different from the two starving vessels thing as you can possibly get. And here's a detail about that which I think is genuinely gorgeous. When two whole people are together, they can actually let each other be alone. They can let each other go into the quiet room, because they're not threatened by it. Think about the empty vessel relationship. In that one, if one person wants solitude, the other person panics. Why do you need to be alone? What's wrong? Are you pulling away? Don't leave me. Because the empty person experiences their partner's solitude as abandonment, as the source of their filling threatening to walk away. But two whole people understand that solitude is where each of them stays themselves, where each of them keeps the relationship with their own depths alive. So they give it to each other freely. They protect each other's aloneness. There's this idea that the highest form of love isn't two people staring at each other. It's two people standing side by side, each whole, each still themselves, looking out at the world together. Two complete people who chose each other, who give each other room to keep being complete. That's not the absence of closeness. That's the deepest kind of closeness there is, because it's between two people who actually exist, instead of two masks performing a duet. Now let's talk about the collision, because this is the part that's going to land for a lot of you. What happens in a relationship when one person is whole and the other is still all persona, still all performance, still empty in the center? Because this is incredibly common, and it creates some very specific patterns that you've almost certainly lived through on one side or the other. Here's the dynamic. The whole person shows up complete, with a self, with edges, with a real no, not desperate for approval. And the empty person, the persona person, finds this both intensely attractive and intensely threatening at the same time. Attractive because the whole person has the solidity, the center, the realness that the empty person is unconsciously starving for. They're drawn to it like a moth. They want to get near it. They want to absorb it. But threatening because the whole person can't be controlled the way the empty person needs to control. Remember, the empty person relates through the transaction. I'll be what you need, you fill my hole. But the whole person won't play that game. They won't perform on demand. They won't shrink to be more manageable. They won't betray themselves to soothe the other person's emptiness. And that drives the empty person crazy because their entire relational strategy doesn't work on a whole person. So what does the empty person do? They try harder to control. They test. They provoke. They create drama to see if the whole person will abandon their center and come chasing, come reassuring, come performing. Because in the empty person's whole experience of relationships, you keep someone close by managing them, by manipulating the approval economy, by creating need. And when the whole person just stays whole, doesn't take the bait, doesn't abandon themselves, but also doesn't abandon the relationship, that's genuinely confusing and destabilizing for the empty person because it doesn't fit any script they know. And here's where it can go one of two ways. Either the empty person is so destabilized by being near someone real that they flee, they blow it up, they go find someone else they can run the old transaction on. Or, and this is the hopeful version, being near a whole person, being loved by someone who won't play the empty game, slowly becomes the safest invitation they've ever gotten to do their own work. Because for the first time, they're with someone who isn't going to fill their hole for them, but who also isn't going to abandon them. And that combination is exactly the condition under which a person might finally find the courage to go into their own quiet room. But, and this is critical, the whole person can't do that work for them. This is the trap that catches so many people with good hearts. The whole person looks at the empty person and sees their potential, sees the gold buried in their shadow, sees who they could become if they did the work, and thinks, I can love them into wholeness. I can be patient enough, supportive enough, present enough, and my love will heal them. And it never works. It cannot work, because nobody can do another person's individuation for them. The quiet room is a room you have to enter alone. You can love someone, you can support them, you can create the conditions where the work becomes possible, but you cannot go into the room for them. And if you try, you'll just exhaust yourself, and worse, you'll often enable them to keep avoiding the room, because your endless support becomes one more comfortable diversion that lets them never have to face themselves. The hard truth is that love is not a substitute for someone else's inner work. It never has been. The most loving thing you can sometimes do is to stay whole yourself and refuse to fill the hole, so that the emptiness finally becomes uncomfortable enough that the person goes and faces it. Let me put that into a scene because it's painful and real. Picture someone who's done a lot of their own work, who's relatively whole, and they fall for someone who's charming and magnetic, but completely empty in the center, all performance. And for a while, the whole person pours everything in: patience, love, support, reassurance, trying to fill that person up, trying to love them into being whole. And the more they pour, the emptier the other person seems to get, because you cannot fill a bottomless hole from the outside, and every drop you pour in just confirms to the empty person that filling comes from outside, so they demand more and more. And the whole person slowly drains themselves dry, trying to do the impossible. And one day the whole person realizes, I've been trying to do this person's individuation for them, and not only is it not working, I'm losing my own wholeness in the process. I'm becoming empty too. I'm abandoning my own quiet room to stand guard over theirs. And that realization is brutal, but it's also the beginning of freedom, because it's the moment they understand that the most loving thing, and the only thing that could possibly help, is to step back and let the other person face their own emptiness. You can hold the door open, you cannot walk through it for them. Now I want to widen this out beyond romance, because this same pattern, this same dynamic between whole selves and empty selves plays out everywhere, in friendships, in families, at work, in every place humans gather. And there's a particularly important version of it I want to dig into, which is the family. Because the family is where almost all of our persona and almost all of our shadow originally got built. Remember way back, the kid whose ambition got punished, and so they exiled it. That's the family doing its work. The family is the first crowd, the very first herd you ever had to win approval from. And the rules of that first crowd, what was acceptable, what got you love, what got you punished, what parts of you had to go into the shadow to keep the peace. Those rules got carved into you before you could even talk, before you had any ability to question them. The family is where you learned which parts of yourself were allowed to exist. And here's the heavy part. Most people spend their entire adult lives unconsciously still obeying the rules of that first crowd, that original family system, long after they've left home, long after the people who made those rules are gone. The man who learned at age 4 that anger gets you abandoned is, at age 40, still swallowing his anger, still exiling it, still leaking it out sideways as passive aggression, because the 4-year-old's survival strategy never got updated. The woman who learned that her needs were a burden is, decades later, still apologizing for having needs, still shrinking, still performing the low-maintenance daughter who doesn't ask for anything. The family rules become the deepest layer of the persona, the part of the mask we don't even know is a mask, because we put it on before we had the words for it. And one of the most profound things that happens in the quiet room when you do the real work is that you start to see those rules for the first time as rules, as choices someone else made, that you absorbed, that you're free to question now, that maybe don't serve you anymore, that maybe never did. And this is where it gets genuinely liberating and also genuinely difficult. Because when you start doing your individuation work, when you start reclaiming exiled parts and questioning the original family rules, you change. In the family system, the original crowd often doesn't like that one bit. Systems want to stay the same. They have a kind of gravity, a pull back toward the old arrangement. So the person who was always the quiet one, who finally finds their voice and starts speaking up, gets met with, "Whoa, what's gotten into you? You've changed, you're not yourself." When in fact, they're becoming themselves, maybe for the first time. The person who was always the giver, who finally starts setting boundaries and saying no, gets accused of being selfish, of being difficult, of not being who they used to be. And there's tremendous pressure to go back, to put the mask back on, to resume your old role in the family script, because your wholeness disrupts a system that was organized around your emptiness, around you playing your assigned part. And this is one of the hardest tests of the work, because the pull to go back is so strong and so loaded with love and guilt and history. The family isn't being evil, they're just a system trying to maintain itself, and they often genuinely don't understand why you can't just be how you always were. But here's the thing, the whole self can feel that pull and not obey it. That's the entire point. Remember the man who can't be reduced to a character in someone else's script? The family is the original author of your script, the first people who cast you in a role. And individuation means quietly, lovingly, but firmly stepping out of the role they wrote for you, even when they don't understand, even when it costs you something, even when there's guilt. Because the alternative is to spend your whole life performing a part that was written for a child you no longer are, by a crowd whose approval you no longer actually need, just because the 4-year-old inside you still believes that stepping out of the role means losing love forever. The work, in part, is teaching that 4-year-old that you're safe now, that you can survive disapproval now, that you don't need the whole crowd's permission to be yourself anymore. Let me bring Jung back in here directly, because he had a concept that fits this perfectly. He talked about how the second half of life has a different task than the first half. In the first half of life, he said, your job is mostly to build a strong persona, to establish yourself in the world, to learn the rules of the crowd, and play the game well enough to get a foothold, get the job, find the relationships, build the structure of a life. And that's appropriate, that's healthy. A kid and a young adult need to build a functional mask. But then, Jung said, there comes a turning point, often in the middle of life, where the task completely reverses. Where the job is no longer to build up the persona, but to take it apart, to turn inward, to start the individuation, to reclaim the shadow, to stop performing the role you built and start becoming whole. And he thought that an enormous amount of midlife misery, the famous midlife crisis, is exactly what happens when a person reaches that turning point and refuses to make the turn. They keep frantically polishing the persona, keep chasing the external markers, keep performing, long past the point where it gives them anything, because they're terrified of the inward turn, terrified of the quiet room, and so they get stuck, depressed, hollow, going through the motions of a successful life that feels strangely dead. The midlife crisis in this reading isn't a malfunction, it's a summons. It's the deep self knocking on the door, saying it's time. The building phase is over. Now comes the becoming whole phase. Now you have to go into the room. And the man who buys the sports car and chases the affair and grabs at every external thing to feel alive again, he's heard the knock, he just doesn't understand it. He thinks the answer is more of the outer thing, more performance, more youth, more approval, when the actual answer is the exact opposite, to turn inward, to go quiet, to finally face everything he's been outrunning his whole life. The crisis is the invitation to do the work, and the people who accept the invitation often describe the second half of their life as far richer, far more real, far more themselves than the first half ever was. While the people who refuse it just keep running. And running gets sadder and sadder the older you get, because you can feel the time running out, and you still haven't met yourself. Now I want to circle back to something we've been dancing around, because I keep saying the quiet room and the work and meeting yourself. And I want to get more concrete about what that actually involves, beyond just sitting in silence. Because sitting in silence is the doorway, but there's a whole architecture of ways that humans have used across history to do this work. And I want to walk through a few, because some of them might surprise you, and one of them you're probably already doing without realizing it's shadow work. The first one, the most obvious, is what we've been talking about, just sitting. Deliberate solitude, silence, no input, letting your inner world surface. The monks did it, the Stoics did it. Every meditative tradition on earth has some version of it. Just being with yourself, watching what comes up, witnessing without wallowing. That's the foundation. The second one is writing. And this one is huge, and it's the one a lot of people are already half doing. Remember Marcus Aurelius and his private journal. Montaigne in his tower, writing essays to understand himself. There's something about writing, actually putting words down, privately, just for yourself, not for an audience, that does something sitting alone can't quite do. It externalizes the inner stuff. It takes the swirling, formless mess inside and forces it into words. And the moment it's in words, on the page, in front of you, you can look at it. You can witness it. The journal becomes a kind of mirror, a place where the shadow can come up into the light of language and be seen. And the key, the absolutely critical key, is that it has to be private, just for you, with no audience. Because the second you imagine someone reading it, the persona comes back online, the performance restarts, and you start writing the mask instead of the face. Private writing is one of the most powerful tools for individuation that exists, and it's available to literally anyone with a pen and the willingness to be honest with themselves when no one's watching. The third one is dreams, and this is the most Jungian of all. Jung believed that dreams are the unconscious speaking directly to you, in its own strange, symbolic language, often saying exactly the things your conscious persona refuses to hear. He thought the shadow shows up in dreams constantly, that the threatening figure chasing you, the dark stranger, the person of the same sex as you who frightens or disgusts you in the dream, is very often a representation of your own exiled shadow trying to get your attention. And so he took dreams incredibly seriously, as messages from the deep self, as a kind of nightly mail delivery from the parts of you that the daytime persona keeps locked away. Now you don't have to go full Jungian dream analysis to use this, but just the practice of paying attention to your dreams, noticing what recurs, noticing what disturbs you, asking, what part of me is this? That's another doorway into the same room. The unconscious is talking to you every single night. Most people just never listen. And there's a fourth one that surprises people, which is that real, deep conversation with the right kind of person can be individuation work too, but only a specific kind. Not the performance-to-performance chatter of two masks, not small talk, not approval seeking, but the rare conversation where you actually drop the mask and say the true thing, the scary thing, the thing you've never said out loud, to someone who can hold it without flinching and without trying to fix it. That kind of conversation, and it's rare, genuinely rare, can bring shadow material up into the light just like the quiet room can, because the act of speaking the buried thing to a safe witness is itself a kind of reclaiming. This is, by the way, a huge part of what good therapy actually is. It's a structured relationship designed specifically to be a safe enough container that you can bring your shadow up into the light and look at it with another person who won't shame it or flee from it. It's the quiet room with a trained witness in it. And there's no shame in needing that. Some of the buried stuff is heavy enough, old enough, painful enough, that doing it entirely alone is genuinely too hard. and having a skilled person sit with you while you face it is one of the wisest things a human can do. So notice what all 4 of these have in common. Sitting, writing, dreaming, true conversation. Every one of them is about creating a condition where the persona relaxes its grip and the buried self gets to surface and be witnessed. That's the whole technology in all its forms. Drop the performance, create safety, let the deep stuff come up, witness it without drowning, reclaim it. And it doesn't actually matter which door you use. It matters that you go through one of them regularly instead of spending your whole life with the persona clamped down and the shadow raging in the basement and the noise turned up so loud you never have to hear any of it. Let me come back to the emotional truth underneath all of this for a second, because we've covered a lot of mechanism and I don't want to lose the heart of it. Here's what I think is the most important thing to understand about why people avoid this work, deeper even than the discomfort, deeper than the atrophied muscle. People avoid it because, at the very bottom, they're afraid that if they actually looked, if they really turned the flashlight all the way on, they'd discover that there's nothing there. That under all the performance, under all the masks and roles and approval seeking, there's just emptiness, a void, no real self at all. That's the deepest fear, and it's the one that keeps people running hardest, because the noise and the crowd and the performance protect them from ever having to find out whether there's actually a person inside or just a hollow space where a person should be. And here's the thing I most want you to hear. That fear is a lie. There is always someone in there. The emptiness people are terrified of finding isn't the absence of a self. It's the experience of a self that's been so buried, so exiled, so overgrown with persona that it can't be felt anymore. The void isn't proof that there's no one home. It's proof that the someone home has been locked in the basement so long you forgot they exist. And the work isn't about discovering whether there's a self in there. There is. There always is. The work is about clearing away enough of the performance and the noise and the exile that you can finally feel the self that's been there the whole time, waiting since before the first crowd ever told you which parts of you were allowed. Nobody who has actually done this work, who has actually gone all the way into the room, comes back reporting that they found nothing. They come back reporting that they found themselves, often for the first time in their entire lives. The fear of the void is the gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper is bluffing. So let me gather up where we've come in this stretch, because we went somewhere important. We took on the great paradox, solitude versus love, and we resolved it by seeing that only a whole self can actually love, because a mask can only seek approval, and that what most people call love is 2 empty vessels trying to fill each other and failing. We dug into projection in romance, how we fall in love with our own exiled gold hung on someone else's face, and how withdrawing those projections is the beginning of seeing and loving a real person. We saw what love between 2 whole selves looks like, chosen out of fullness, not need. 2 complete people standing side by side, protecting each other's solitude. We mapped the collision between whole and empty people in romance and beyond, and the trap of trying to do someone else's individuation for them. We went into the family as the first crowd, the original author of your script, and the work of stepping out of the role they wrote for you. We brought in Jung's 2 halves of life and reframed the midlife crisis as a summons to turn inward. We walked through the 4 doorways, sitting, writing, dreams, and true conversation, including therapy as the room with a trained witness. And we faced the deepest fear of all, the fear of finding nothing inside, and named it as the bluffing gatekeeper that it is. But there's still a final layer, and it's where we're going next, and it might be the most important of all. Because everything we've talked about has been, in a sense, about the individual finding themselves. But there's a question that sits on top of all of it. Once you've done the work, once you're whole, undivided, able to sit in the quiet, able to love from fullness, free of the crowd's script, then what? What's it actually for? Is the point just to feel good, to be unmanipulable, to win at relationships? Or is there something larger, something that the wholeness is actually in service of. Because the monks and the philosophers and the wise people across history didn't go into solitude just to feel better about themselves. They were after something bigger, and what they found out there in the silence has implications for how you live every single day, for what you do with the one self you've finally reclaimed. And that, the question of what wholeness is ultimately for, and how you carry it back out of the quiet room and into a noisy world that will constantly try to take it from you. That's exactly where we're headed next. Okay, so here's the question that's going to close all of this out, and it's the biggest one yet. Once you've done the work, once you're whole, once you can sit in the quiet, once you can love from fullness instead of from a hole, once you're free of the crowd's script, then what? What is all of it actually for? Because if you think the point of becoming whole is just to feel good about yourself, to win at relationships, to be unmanipulable, that's real, that's part of it, but it's not the whole story, and honestly, it's not even the best part. The people who went deepest into solitude across all of history weren't doing it to feel better. They were after something much bigger. And what they found out there in the silence changes what you do with the self you finally reclaimed. Let me explain, because this is where it all comes together. Here's the thing the monks and the philosophers understood that gets lost in the modern self-help version of all this. The goal of going inward was never to stay inward. It was never to become some isolated, self-obsessed hermit gazing at your own navel forever. The solitude was always in service of coming back out, different, clearer, more capable of acting rightly in the world. The monks went to the desert, yes, but the great ones came back with wisdom that shaped entire civilizations. Thoreau went to the pond, but he came back and wrote things that helped fuel movements for justice that are still going. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself in private, but he did it so that he could rule an empire with more wisdom and less cruelty the next morning. The quiet room was never the destination, it was the forge. You go in to become whole, and then you carry that wholeness back out into a loud, demanding, chaotic world, and you act in it as a real person instead of as a frightened performer. The inward turn and the outward life aren't opposites. The inward turn is what makes the outward life worth a damn. And here's why that matters so much. Here's the payoff of the entire thing. A person who has done the work, who is whole, who has a real center, that person can actually be of use to the world in a way the empty person never can. Think about it. The empty person, the performer, can't really help anyone because everything they do is secretly in service of their own approval hunger. Their generosity has strings. Their kindness is a transaction. Their good deeds are performances for an audience, ways of feeding the whole. Even when they do good things, the good things are corrupted at the root because they're not really about the other person. They're about the performer's need to be seen as good. But the whole person, the one who's already full, who doesn't need the world to fill them, when they can actually act for the thing itself. They can help someone without needing credit. They can do the right thing when no one's watching, because they're not doing it for the watching. They can give from genuine overflow instead of from a desperate attempt to fill themselves. The whole self is the only self that can be genuinely generous, genuinely good, genuinely useful, because it's the only self that isn't secretly using every action to feed its own emptiness. Let me put that in a way you can feel. Picture two people who both volunteer at, let's say, a shelter. One of them is empty in the center, and underneath, every hour they spend there is feeding a story about what a good person they are, collecting evidence for an identity, performing goodness for an internal and external audience. And you can feel it. The people they're supposedly helping can feel it. There's something slightly off, something that's not quite about them, something self-regarding under the surface. And the other person is whole, and they're just there, fully present, actually seeing the people in front of them, actually responding to what's needed, not collecting evidence about themselves, not performing, just doing the thing because the thing needs doing, and they're full enough to give without taking. Same action, same hours, completely different quality, and everyone involved can feel the difference, even if they can't name it. The whole person's goodness is clean. It's not contaminated by the hidden agenda of the whole that needs filling. And that's what wholeness is ultimately for. for. Not just so you can feel good, so you can finally be good, for real, in a way that actually reaches other people, instead of secretly being about you. Now here's the hard part, and this is where we have to get honest about what it costs to carry wholeness back out into the world. Because the world is not going to make it easy. Everything we've talked about, the crowd, the herd, the persona, the approval economy, the script other people want to cast you in, all of that is still out there, and it's relentless, and it will work on you every single day, trying to pull you back into the role, back into the performance, back into the whole. Becoming whole once in the quiet room is not a permanent vaccination. The pull of the crowd never stops. And so the real test isn't whether you can find yourself in solitude. It's whether you can keep yourself out in the noise, in the relationships, in the family, at the job, in the feed, in the constant roar of a world that profits from your emptiness and wants you performing. Think about that last part for a second, because it's genuinely important and it's genuinely dark. So much of the modern world is actually built to keep you empty, because empty people are easier to sell to, easier to manipulate, easier to herd. The whole machinery of advertising runs on the hole in your center. It exists to convince you that you're incomplete, that you're lacking, that there's a product or an image or a status that will finally fill you. And the entire thing collapses the moment you become whole, because a whole person can't be sold a cure for an emptiness they don't have. The whole attention economy runs on your inability to sit in the quiet room. It's specifically engineered to be the off switch for your flashlight, to grab you the instant silence appears, to keep you in a perpetual state of distraction so you never turn inward. Because a person who turns inward and becomes whole is a person who's much harder to capture and monetize. So when I say the world will try to pull you back, I don't just mean other people. I mean entire systems, designed by very smart people, optimized over decades, aimed directly at keeping you running from yourself. You are not paranoid for feeling like something is constantly trying to pull your attention outward and keep you from ever being alone with your own mind. Something is. That's not a conspiracy, it's just the business model. And that's exactly why the practice has to be ongoing. Why we said back in an earlier part that this is a relationship and not a finish line. Because the pull is constant, your return to the quiet room has to be constant too. You don't win this once, you win it daily, in small moments, by repeatedly choosing the room over the noise, the real over the performance, your own voice over the herd's roar. Every time you put the phone in the drawer and sit with the silence, you're pushing back against the entire machine. Every time you write the honest, private thing instead of performing, you're reclaiming a piece of yourself the world wants to keep fragmented. Every time you say the true no instead of the convenient yes, you're refusing the script. It's not one heroic battle, it's 10,000 tiny choices every day for the rest of your life. And the people who stay whole are simply the people who keep making those choices again and again, long after the initial work is done. Let me come back to Pascal one more time, because we started with him, and it's right to end with him, and there's a depth to his observation we haven't fully mined yet. Remember, he said nearly all of humanity's problems come from our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a comment about personal restlessness, about boredom, about distraction. But Pascal was pointing at something much bigger, and it connects to everything we've covered. He was saying that the inability to be alone with ourselves is the root from which an enormous amount of human suffering and human evil actually grows. Think about it through everything we now know. The person who can't sit alone never meets their shadow, so their shadow runs them from the basement, leaking out as the cruelty and the control and the passive aggression we talked about. The person who can't sit alone never becomes whole, so they stay empty, and the empty get filled by the mob, and the mob does monstrous things. The person who can't sit alone never reclaims their projections, so they keep hanging their own darkness on other people and hating them for it. And a huge amount of human conflict from the personal to the global, is exactly that. People warring against their own disowned shadows projected onto an enemy. Pascal saw all of it, folded into that one quiet observation. The inability to sit alone in a room isn't a small personal failing. It's the seed of an astonishing amount of the harm human beings do to each other. And the corresponding truth is staggering, that a great deal of doing less harm in the world starts with something as humble and as difficult as learning to sit alone in a quiet room and face yourself. That reframes the stakes of this entire thing, doesn't it? It means that the quiet room isn't just self-care. It isn't just personal growth. It isn't just about you being happier or your relationships being better, although it's all of those. It's also, in a real and direct way, about whether you'll add to the harm in the world or subtract from it. Because the person who hasn't met their shadow will, without ever intending to, inflict it on everyone around them. Their kids, their partner, their coworkers, the strangers they project onto, the crowds they get swept into. And the person who has met their shadow, who's done the work, who carries their wholeness back out into the world, that person breaks the chain. They stop passing the darkness down. They stop projecting it out. They become, in their small corner of the world, a place where the harm stops instead of continuing. And if enough people did that, if enough people could just sit quietly alone in a room and face themselves, Pascal's claim implies you'd actually solve a meaningful chunk of humanity's problems at the root. Not all of them, but a lot of them. More than any policy or any technology, maybe, because you'd be working on the actual source, the human heart that hasn't met itself. Now I want to bring this all the way back down to you, sitting wherever you are right now, because we've gone through philosophers and emperors and monks and the whole architecture of the psyche, and at the end of it, the entire thing comes down to one absurdly simple, absurdly difficult act. Putting down the phone, turning off the noise, sitting in a quiet room, and staying. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everything Pascal and Jung and the Stoics and Thoreau and Montaigne and Nietzsche were pointing at, all of it distills down to whether you can do that one thing. Be alone with yourself, without flinching, without grabbing the off switch, long enough to actually meet whoever's in there. And the wild thing is how accessible it is. You don't need a desert, or a tower, or a pond, or a monastery, or a fortune, or anyone's permission. You need a room, some silence, and the willingness to stay when it gets uncomfortable. That's the most powerful self-transforming technology that has ever existed, and it's been sitting right there, free, available to every human who's ever lived, and most of us spend our entire lives running from it. Let me put you one last time inside the same scene we've come back to, because I want you to really feel the choice. It's quiet, you're alone, there's no one to perform for, no notification, no crowd, no approval to chase, just you and the silence and the inside of your own head. And you feel that familiar pull, that itch, that reach for the off switch. And right there, in that tiny moment, is the entire thing. That little gap between the silence arriving and your hand reaching for the phone, that gap is the doorway. Everything we've talked about lives in that gap. The shadow waiting to be met, the exiled gold waiting to be reclaimed, the whole self waiting to be felt. The real you that's been buried under the performance since the first crowd told you which parts of yourself were allowed. It's all right there on the other side of you not reaching for the phone. And the only question, the only one that has ever mattered in all of this, is whether you can stay in that gap a little longer, and then a little longer than that, and let the flashlight come on, and not run. Because here's what's true, and it's where I'll leave you. The thing modern life works hardest, most aggressively, most relentlessly to keep you from, being alone with yourself, no phone, no crowd, no approval to chase, is the exact thing that reveals who you actually are. That's not an accident. The world keeps you from it because the world profits from your emptiness, and your emptiness depends on you never sitting in that room. And the people who can't face it stay trapped, performing a role for everyone else, falling deeper into the uncanny valley of their own lives, leaking their shadow onto everyone around them, getting swept up by whatever crowd roars loudest, chasing a wholeness they'll never find because they're looking for it in approval and achievement and other people instead of in the one place it actually lives. And the people who can face it, who can sit in the quiet, meet the shadow, reclaim the gold, become undivided, those are the people who get to be real, who get to love from fullness, who can't be cast in someone else's script, who break the chain instead of passing it down, who carry a whole self back out into a noisy world and actually do some good with it. It turns out the most rebellious, most powerful, most transformative thing you can do in a world built to keep you fragmented and distracted and empty is also one of the oldest and simplest things there is. Sit alone in a quiet room, stay, and finally, after all this time, meet yourself. The Desert Fathers knew it, Montaigne in his tower knew it, the Emperor with his private journal knew it. And now you know it too, not as a fact to recite, but as a door that's been standing open inside you this whole time, waiting for you to stop running long enough to walk through it. The room is right there. It always has been. The only thing left is whether you go in. And that one quiet choice, repeated for the rest of your life, is basically the whole difference between a person who became themselves and a person who never quite did. So the next time the silence shows up and your hand starts reaching, maybe just don't. Maybe just stay and see who's there.